Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. And leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. Retail during Black Friday is basically legalized torture, and after 3 years at Best Buy, I thought I'd seen every type of customer meltdown imaginable. Started there right after college when my journalism degree turned out to be worth about as much as the paper it was printed on. Figured I'd work electronics for a few months, until something better came along. That was back when I still believed in things like career trajectories and 5-year plans, before I learned that some jobs leave scars deeper than any corporate ladder is worth climbing. Standing at Register 4 that Friday with Mariah Carey's voice drilling into my skull for the 1,000th time, watching the line snake all the way back to the gaming section, I had no idea I was about to meet someone who'd teach me what real fear felt like. He slammed the coupon on my counter hard enough to make my scanner beep. This wrinkled piece of paper that looked like it had been through a washing machine, dated from September with edges torn and the ink barely readable. When I scanned it and the system rejected it as expired, I watched his whole body language shift, shoulders squaring up while his breathing got heavy and deliberate, like a bull preparing to charge. The guy was wearing this stained Jacksonville Jaguars jersey that hung loose on his wiry frame, and there was something about the way his pupils dilated when I started explaining store policy that made my throat go dry. His right hand grabbed the wireless keyboard from our display stand before I even finished my sentence. And next thing I knew, it was flying at my face, the sharp plastic corner splitting my bottom lip open and painting my register screen with blood droplets. Pain exploded through my mouth and I stumbled backward into the gift card rack, tasting copper while blood ran down my chin and soaked into my work shirt. But he wasn't done. This maniac actually lunged across the counter, knocking over the credit card reader and sending promotional flyers flying everywhere, his fingers wrapping around my throat before I could even process what was happening. His grip was terrifying, fingers digging into my windpipe while his face got so close I could smell the stale coffee and cigarettes on his breath, could see the broken capillaries in his eyes as he squeezed harder. Customers were screaming, backing away, some pulling out phones to record instead of helping, and all I could think about was how my vision was starting to tunnel, these dark spots dancing at the edges while my lungs burned for air. Then Brandon from the Geek Squad counter came flying over, this massive former football player who grabbed the guy in a chokehold and yanked him backward, but not before the psycho bit down on his own tongue hard enough to fill his mouth with blood. As Brandon and 2 other employees pinned him to the floor, the guy turned his head toward me and spat, sending a spray of his blood mixed with saliva right across my face, into my eyes and mouth, making me gag and stumble toward the employee bathroom. I could hear him screaming behind me, this raw, primal sound that barely sounded human anymore, yelling that he'd wait outside until we closed, that he knew which car was mine, that this wasn't over. Security was already calling 911, but the damage was done. I was shaking so bad I could barely turn the bathroom faucet, watching the pink water swirl down the drain while my reflection showed me someone I didn't recognize, face splattered with a stranger's blood, lips swollen and still bleeding. Management gave me an hour break after the cops hauled him away, said I could go home if I wanted, but with Black Friday sales we were already understaffed, and honestly, I needed the holiday pay to cover December rent. My manager, Kevin, handed me a fresh polo shirt from the back and some paper towels with hydrogen peroxide, told me to take as long as I needed, that they'd comp my lunch from the break room vending machines. I sat in the employee lounge trying to stop my body from trembling, pressing ice wrapped in paper towels against my split lip, while Gloria from customer service kept bringing me water bottles and asking if I wanted her to call someone. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind this hollow, jittery feeling like I'd drunk 10 energy drinks on an empty stomach, and every time I closed my eyes I could feel his hands around my throat again. Around 2 in the afternoon, I finally felt steady enough to head to my car for some fresh air. Needed to get away from the recycled mall ventilation and the constant Christmas music that was making my head pound. My beat-up Corolla was parked in the employee section behind the store, and I was already lighting a cigarette before I noticed something was wrong with the hood. Someone had taken a key or maybe a screwdriver and carved deep gouges into the paint, spelling out "lying bitch" in jagged letters that cut through to the metal underneath. My cigarette fell from my lips as I walked around the car, finding long scratches down both sides. The driver's side mirror hanging by its wires and what looked like spit marks all over the windshield that had dried into crusty white spots. I ran back inside and found Kevin in his office, showed him photos on my phone of the damage while trying to keep my voice from cracking. He called mall security and they pulled up the parking lot footage, but the cameras covering the employee section had conveniently been spray-painted black sometime in the last hour, probably when security was busy dealing with two women fighting over a discounted laptop. Kevin said they'd file another police report, add it to the assault charges, but we both knew the cops weren't going to waste resources searching for someone over vandalism when they had actual Black Friday violence to deal with. He offered to let me park in the loading dock for the rest of my shift, somewhere with working cameras and security guards, but that meant I'd have to move my car right now, go back out there where he might be watching, waiting. Brandon walked me to my car with a baseball bat from the sporting goods section, scanning the parking lot while I started the engine with shaking fingers, the whole time expecting that maniac to come charging from behind a van or between the dumpsters. We made it to the loading dock without incident, but I couldn't focus for the rest of my shift. Kept checking the security monitors every time I passed the manager's station, looking for that Jacksonville jersey in the crowds. Every aggressive customer made me flinch. Every raised voice sent my heart racing. And by the time 8 o'clock rolled around, I was exhausted from being hypervigilant for 6 straight hours. The store closed at midnight, but they let me clock out early, said I'd been through enough for one day. And Kevin promised that security would walk me to my car when I was ready to leave. I changed out of my work clothes in the employee bathroom, stuffing the blood-stained polo into a plastic bag because I couldn't stand looking at it anymore, then waited in the break room for Jerry from security to finish his rounds. He was this older guy, probably pushing 60, who always talked about his grandkids and brought homemade cookies on Fridays. Not exactly intimidating, but better than walking out alone. We went through the loading dock instead of the main exit, Jerry's flashlight sweeping across the empty trucks and delivery bays, while my keys dug into my palm from gripping them so tight. My car started on the first try, thank God, and Jerry waited until I pulled out before heading back inside. But I could barely see through the spiderweb of dried spit on my windshield. Had to use half a bottle of washer fluid just to clear a spot to drive. Instead of taking my usual route home, I drove in circles for 20 minutes, watching my rearview mirror for any car that seemed to be following, taking random turns through residential neighborhoods I'd never been in before. Every set of headlights made my chest tighten, especially when they stayed behind me for more than a few blocks. And twice I pulled into gas stations just to see if anyone would follow me into the parking lot. By the time I reached my apartment complex, my jaw hurt from clenching it, and my gas tank was nearly empty from all the detours. But at least I was certain nobody had followed me home. I parked under a streetlight close to the building entrance, practically ran to the door with my keys between my fingers like tiny weapons, and didn't breathe properly until I heard my deadbolt click into place. Saturday morning came too soon, my alarm going off at 7 for another Black Friday weekend shift, and I seriously considered calling in sick until I remembered my rent was due in 4 days. I took a different route to work, parked in the customer lot instead of employee parking, and made it through most of my shift without incident. Just the usual holiday shopping chaos and exhausted co-workers running on energy drinks and determination. But around 9 that night, an hour before closing, I was restocking gift cards near the back exit when I heard tapping on the emergency door, the one we used for smoke breaks that supposedly only opened from the inside. Through the narrow window I saw him, still wearing that same filthy Jaguars jersey, holding what looked like a broken beer bottle in one hand while the other hand beckoned me closer, his mouth moving like he was trying to tell me something important. My whole body went rigid. Couldn't move, couldn't breathe, just stood there staring at his face pressed against the glass while he kept tapping with the bottle. leaving little scratches on the window with each tap. Then he held up his phone with his free hand, showed me my own Instagram profile on the screen, scrolled through photos of my apartment building, my roommate's car, the coffee shop where I studied sometimes, and I realized he'd been doing more than just waiting around the store. He pointed at the door handle, mouthed the words, "Open up," then drew the jagged edge of the bottle across his own throat in a slashing motion before pointing it at me, and that finally broke my paralysis enough to stumble backward and scream for security. Jerry and 2 mall cops came running within seconds, but by the time they got outside, he was gone. Just some blood drops on the concrete where he'd apparently cut his hand on the bottle, and a fresh scratch in the door's paint that spelled out, "Soon." The police took it seriously this time, especially after I showed them the Instagram stalking, and one officer mentioned they'd actually been looking for this guy since Friday because turns out I wasn't his first victim at a retail store, just the latest in a string of attacks across 3 different malls. They caught him 2 hours later at a Motel 6 off the interstate, still wearing that disgusting jersey, with a notebook full of employee schedules he'd somehow gotten from our dumpster and printed screenshots of social media profiles for half the Best Buy staff, not just me. Never went back to that job, quit over text that same night while sitting in the police station giving my statement. Didn't even care about the 2 weeks' notice or my last paycheck. Found out later from Gloria that he got 18 months for assault and harassment, which seemed like nothing considering what he put me through. But at least they added a restraining order that covered every Best Buy location in the state. Still work retail, actually, managing a small bookstore downtown now where the worst customer complaint is usually about us not carrying their favorite author. And every Black Friday I remember to be grateful for quiet shifts, and customers who accept expired coupons are actually expired. Sometimes I still check my rearview mirror more than necessary, still park under streetlights, still feel my throat tighten when someone gets too aggressive about a return policy. But at least I sleep through the night now without waking up feeling phantom hands around my neck. My divorce papers were barely 2 months old when I found myself standing outside that electronics store off Highway 40, clutching a thermos of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. 4 in the morning on Black Friday, surrounded by strangers wrapped in blankets and puffer coats, all of us pretending we weren't slightly insane for being there. My therapist had been pushing me to reclaim my independence, to stop hiding in my apartment eating microwave dinners and watching true crime documentaries, and somehow that advice morphed into me joining the consumer stampede for a discounted television. My sister Diane had called me 6 times the night before, begging to tag along for safety, but I needed to prove I could navigate the world solo again, even if that world was a parking lot full of bargain hunters checking their phones every 30 seconds. When those automatic doors finally hummed to life, the crowd surged forward like water breaking through a dam, and I let the momentum carry me straight to the electronics section where gaming consoles stood stacked in perfect pyramids, their boxes gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Everything shifted into nightmare territory when 2 men near the PlayStation display started raising their voices, the sound slicing through the normal Black Friday soundtrack of squeaky carts and crying babies. One guy wore a faded Metallica shirt that clung to his beer belly, his thick fingers wrapped possessively around the very last console box, while this younger man in a gray hoodie kept jabbing his finger at the air between them, insisting he'd been standing in that exact spot since the doors opened, that he'd already called his son to promise him the PlayStation would be under their tree. I stood maybe 15 feet away, close enough to smell the older man's cigarette-stained breath when the wind shifted, close enough to see Gray Hoodie's jaw muscles twitching with barely contained rage. The shoppers around them began creating distance, that primal recognition when violence pollutes the air, and my brain screamed at me to move with them. But my legs turned to concrete, my eyes locked on Gray Hoodie's hand sliding into his jacket pocket. The hunting knife emerged in one fluid motion, its serrated edge catching the overhead lights, and Metallica's shirt released the PlayStation box like it had suddenly caught fire, his complexion draining from angry crimson to morgue pale in an instant. What happened next still plays in my head sometimes when I'm trying to fall asleep. This horrible sequence that lasted maybe 3 seconds but stretched out like molten glass in my memory. Metallica's shirt reached behind his back underneath that stretched out band logo, and suddenly there was a pistol in his hand. One of those compact black things that looked almost toy-like under the store's harsh lighting. Gray Hoodie actually laughed, this broken sound that made my teeth hurt, and he lunged forward with the knife raised high, but the gun went off before he made it 2 steps. The first shot hit a display case full of tablets, sending glass cascading across the linoleum like deadly diamonds, and Gray Hoodie dove behind an end cap stacked with wireless headphones. More shots followed, 3 or 4 in rapid succession, each one making the crowd scream louder, and I watched a woman abandon her shopping cart with her toddler still strapped in the seat, though another shopper grabbed the kid before running. The air filled with the sharp smell of gunpowder, mixing with the synthetic vanilla from those plug-in air fresheners the store used, creating this nauseating combination that made my throat close up. I dropped to my knees and scrambled behind the customer service counter, pressing myself against the fake wood paneling, while my heart hammered so hard I thought my ribs might crack. Through the gap between the counter and the floor, I could see feet running in every direction. Some people losing shoes in their panic, others trampling dropped merchandise without even noticing. The shooting had stopped, but I could hear Metallica's shirt walking slowly down the main aisle, his work boots making this distinct scraping sound against the floor, like he had something stuck to the sole. Then I heard his voice, calm and measured despite what had just happened, talking on his phone to someone, and the words he said made my entire body go rigid with a different kind of terror. He was explaining how there had been an incident, how some crazy guy with a knife had attacked him, how he'd had to defend himself, but then he said something that turned my blood to ice water, something about making sure there weren't any witnesses who could contradict his version of events, that no one could identify him if they weren't around to talk. His footsteps grew louder, methodical and unhurried, like he was shopping for groceries instead of hunting human beings in a store that had turned into a war zone. I could hear him checking each aisle, pushing aside promotional displays and kicking at the wheeled racks of clearance items, muttering numbers under his breath like he was keeping count of something. My phone sat heavy in my back pocket, but I couldn't risk the sound of pulling it out, couldn't even chance the screen lighting up my hiding spot, so I started crawling on my belly toward the emergency exit sign glowing red at the back of the store. The floor felt sticky under my palms, probably spilled soda from the chaos, and I had to navigate around scattered merchandise, a broken picture frame that would have sliced my hand open if I'd put my weight on it, somebody's abandoned purse with its contents spilled everywhere. Each movement felt impossibly loud, my jacket rustling against the floor, my breathing coming in short gasps that I tried to muffle against my sleeve, certain that any second he'd hear me and come investigate. I made it past the pharmacy section when I heard him destroy the customer service counter where I'd been hiding moments before, the sound of wood splintering and computers crashing to the ground, making me bite down on my tongue to keep from whimpering. He was getting frustrated, his calm facade cracking as he cursed and threatened the empty air, promising that he'd find whoever was hiding, that he had all day, that the cops wouldn't show up for at least another 10 minutes given how many Black Friday calls they were probably fielding. My knee caught on a plastic hanger someone had dropped, and it skittered across the floor with a sound that might as well have been a fire alarm in the eerie quiet of the abandoned store. His footsteps stopped immediately, and I heard him chamber another round, the mechanical click echoing off the walls like a death sentence. I pressed myself flat against the cold linoleum, hiding behind a cardboard display for phone cases, watching his shadow grow larger on the wall as he approached my aisle, his breathing heavy and excited now, like a dog that had finally caught a scent. The emergency exit was maybe 20 feet away, but it might as well have been 20 miles with him standing at the end of my aisle, his head turning slowly as he scanned for movement. I could see his reflection in the glossy surface of a television screen, distorted and monstrous, the gun held loose and ready at his side. He took one step into the aisle, then another, his free hand trailing along the shelves, knocking products to the floor in a cascade of plastic and cardboard. A bottle of energy drink rolled past my face, leaving a wet trail of blue liquid, and I had to fight every instinct screaming at me to run. He was maybe 10 feet away when his phone rang, the sound so sudden and jarring that we both jumped, and he answered with an irritated grunt, turning slightly away from my direction. That half-second of distraction was all I needed to launch myself toward the exit, my sneakers slipping on the wet floor as I scrambled for traction, throwing myself against the emergency door's push bar with my full weight. The alarm that erupted when I hit that door was beautiful and terrible all at once. A shrieking wail that would definitely draw attention, but also announced my exact location to the maniac with the gun. I heard him roar something behind me, then the sharp crack of gunfire, and the metal door frame sparked where a bullet struck inches from my head, tiny fragments of hot metal stinging my cheek. The parking lot stretched out before me, cars scattered randomly where panicked shoppers had abandoned them with doors still open and engines running, and I sprinted toward my beat-up Nissan parked in the third row, fumbling for my keys while trying not to trip over the concrete parking blocks. Another shot rang out and a car window to my left exploded in a shower of safety glass that glittered in the early morning sunlight. My fingers finally found the key fob, and I clicked the unlock button repeatedly, diving into the driver's seat and slamming the door just as I saw him burst through the emergency exit. His face twisted with rage, that Metallica shirt now splattered with what looked like someone else's blood. The engine turned over on the second try, my foot jamming the gas pedal before I'd even shifted into drive properly, causing the car to lurch forward and clip the bumper of a minivan. I could see him in my rearview mirror, raising the gun again, and I ducked instinctively as my rear window exploded, showering me with glass pebbles that got caught in my hair and fell down the back of my shirt. The tires screamed against the asphalt as I took the corner too fast, sideswiping a light pole that left a long scrape down the passenger side. But I didn't care about the damage, only about putting distance between me and that monster. I made it to the parking lot exit when I saw something that made my whole body go numb with fresh panic. A white pickup truck peeling out of a spot near the store entrance, the same truck I'd noticed earlier with the Confederate flag bumper sticker and the missing taillight, and I knew without a doubt it was him coming after me. The main road was already filling with morning traffic, people heading to other stores for their Black Friday shopping, completely unaware that a killer was about to merge into their midst. I ran the red light at the intersection, earning angry honks in a near collision with a delivery truck, but I could see that white pickup growing larger in my mirrors, weaving through traffic like a shark through schools of fish. My phone was still in my back pocket, crushed between me and the seat, and I managed to pull it out with one hand while trying to steer with the other, hitting 911 and putting it on speaker. The operator's calm voice asking about my emergency seemed to come from another world, and I tried to explain about the shooting, about being chased, but my words came out in a jumbled rush while I took another corner so hard that 2 wheels lifted off the ground. Behind me, I heard the distinct sound of metal crunching as the pickup plowed through a sedan that hadn't gotten out of the way fast enough, and then he was right on my bumper, close enough that I could see his eyes in my mirror, wild and determined. The operator was saying something about units being dispatched, about finding a safe place, but all I could focus on was the hand emerging from his driver's side window, the gun pointing at my tires, and the knowledge that this wasn't going to end until one of us was dead. I jerked the wheel hard to the right at the last second, cutting across 2 lanes and diving into a residential neighborhood, my side mirror clipping a mailbox and sending it spinning into the street. The pickup tried to follow but took the turn too wide, his front end jumping the curb and plowing through someone's hedge, giving me precious seconds to put distance between us. I zigzagged through the suburban streets, blowing through stop signs while the 911 operator kept asking for my location, but I had no idea where I was anymore. Just rows of identical houses with their Black Friday decorations still up from Thanksgiving. Then I saw it, a police cruiser coming from the opposite direction, lights already flashing, and I laid on my horn while flashing my headlights frantically. The cop car slammed on its brakes and started to turn around, but the white pickup came roaring around the corner behind me, and I heard the sharp crack of gunfire again. saw the police cruiser's windshield spiderweb with impact. Everything erupted into chaos as more sirens filled the air, multiple police cars converging from different directions, and the pickup suddenly veered off, smashing through a wooden fence and disappearing between two houses. I pulled over to the curb and just sat there shaking, my hands welded to the steering wheel, while police cars screamed past in pursuit. An officer approached my window carefully, his hand on his weapon until he saw me, saw the glass in my hair and the blood from small cuts on my face, and his expression softened. They caught the shooter 3 blocks away when he crashed into a parked car trying to escape through someone's backyard, found him still wearing that bloody Metallica shirt with the gun on the floorboard. Spent hours at the police station giving my statement, learning that Gray Hoodie had survived with a shoulder wound and 2 other shoppers had been injured by flying glass. They told me I was lucky, that my decision to run probably saved my life, but I didn't feel lucky, just hollow and exhausted, like I'd aged 10 years in 30 minutes. Diane picked me up from the station, didn't say a word about how she'd warned me not to go alone, just held me while I finally let myself cry in her car. I never did get that television I'd gone shopping for, and I've never gone Black Friday shopping again. But sometimes I still wake up at 4 in the morning, my body convinced it hears work boots scraping across linoleum, coming to find me. Four in the morning might seem insane to wake up just for a sale, but I needed that drill set bad enough to set 3 alarms on my phone. November 2018, I was deep into renovating my basement, spending every weekend covered in sawdust and drywall dust, trying to turn that damp concrete box into something actually livable. My contractor buddy Nathan had given me the inside scoop about Home Depot's Black Friday doorbusters, specifically these DeWalt combo kits going for 70% off. And after burning through 2 cheap drills already that fall, I knew I needed something that would last. I'd just turned 31 that October, and I kept telling myself I was building something real, something permanent, not just renting anymore, but actually investing in my own space. I pulled into the Home Depot parking lot with my old Steelers jacket zipped up tight, saw the crowd already forming in the darkness, and parked way in the back where there were still spots open. Walking toward those doors, seeing all those people bouncing on their feet to stay warm, I actually felt excited, like I was part of something, just a guy trying to save money on tools. When those automatic doors finally slid open at 5 sharp, it was pure chaos. But I managed to weave through the crowd and sprint straight to the power tools section. There it was, one last DeWalt drill and impact driver combo kit sitting on the shelf like it was waiting for me, that bright yellow box practically glowing under the fluorescent lights. I grabbed it with both hands, feeling that little rush of victory you get when you score exactly what you came for. And I even laughed out loud because I couldn't believe my luck. I turned to head toward the checkout, the box tucked under my arm like a football, already thinking about all the projects I could finally finish, when I felt this massive force slam into my back. My body pitched forward hard, and I remember seeing the metal shelf edge coming at my face in slow motion, that silver corner getting bigger and bigger until everything exploded in this wet, crunching sound that I later realized was my teeth breaking. The pain hit like electricity shooting through my skull, and when I touched my mouth, my fingers came away red and holding what looked like white pebbles that used to be parts of my front teeth. I spun around, still holding the drill set somehow, blood dripping from my mouth onto the white tile floor. And there was this guy standing right behind me, maybe 6'2", built like he spent serious time in the gym, wearing a black North Face jacket and a baseball cap pulled low. His face had this weird calmness to it, like pushing someone into a metal shelf was just a normal Friday morning activity, and his eyes kept flicking between my face and the yellow box in my arms. He took a step forward, close enough that I could smell the cigarette smoke on his jacket, and said real quiet, almost friendly, that I should hand over the drill set if I knew what was good for me. Blood was pooling in my mouth and I had to spit it out before I could even answer, watching it splatter dark red on the floor between us, and I told him he was insane if he thought I was giving him anything after what he just did. Other shoppers were flowing around us like water around rocks, everyone too focused on their own Black Friday mission to notice or care that I was standing there bleeding with some maniac threatening me over power tools. The fluorescent lights made everything feel unreal, too bright and harsh, like we were actors on a stage nobody was watching. Without warning, he lunged for the box, his hands wrapping around one end while mine gripped the other, and we were suddenly in this bizarre tug-of-war in the middle of Home Depot. I could hear my blood hitting the floor in steady drops while we struggled, my broken teeth sending lightning bolts of pain through my jaw every time I clenched it. But I wasn't letting go, not after waking up at 4 and getting my face smashed for this stupid drill. An employee in an orange apron walked past, looked at us for maybe half a second, then kept walking like two grown men fighting over tools while one bled from the mouth was perfectly normal Black Friday behavior. The guy suddenly changed tactics, letting go with one hand to reach into his jacket pocket, and I saw the silver glint of a box cutter before he even fully pulled it out, the blade already extended and catching the overhead lights. My grip loosened just from pure instinct, that primitive part of your brain that screams danger when you see a weapon, and he used that split second to rip the box away from me, clutching it against his chest like he just won the lottery. But I wasn't thinking straight anymore, maybe from the pain or the adrenaline, or just pure rage at this whole insane situation, and I grabbed the box right back, yanking it hard enough that we both stumbled sideways into an end cap display of batteries that went clattering across the floor. He swung the box cutter at my hands, not trying to kill me but warning me, the blade whistling past my knuckles close enough that I felt the air move. And that's when I should have let go, should have just walked away and called it a loss. Instead, I heard myself yelling for security for anyone, my voice coming out thick and garbled through the blood and broken teeth, while this psycho just smiled at me, actually smiled, like we were sharing some private joke. He leaned in close enough that his breath was warm on my face and told me we could do this the easy way or the hard way. But either way, he was leaving with that drill set. And then he asked if I really wanted to bleed more over some tools. The store music kept playing overhead, some cheerful holiday song that made the whole scene even more surreal, and I realized that to everyone else we probably just looked like two Black Friday shoppers having a disagreement. I let go of the box and backed away, my legs shaking more than I wanted to admit, thinking at least it was over. I could get to my car and get out of there and deal with my teeth later. He nodded at me like we'd just completed a normal transaction, tucked the drill set under his arm and started walking toward the checkout like nothing had happened, leaving me standing there in a puddle of my own blood surrounded by scattered batteries. I watched him go for maybe 10 seconds, then something in me just snapped, and I found myself following him, not running but walking fast, staying maybe 20 feet behind him as he got in line behind a dozen other early morning shoppers. My phone was in my hand before I even realized I'd pulled it out, and I started recording him, getting his face, his clothes, making sure I had evidence of this lunatic who'd assaulted me over a power tool set. He must have sensed me because he turned around, saw my phone pointed at him, and his whole expression changed, that calm mask cracking to show something uglier underneath. He stepped out of line and started walking toward me, faster than before, and I backed up instinctively. But he kept coming, the box cutter still visible in his jacket pocket, and I turned and headed for the exit, telling myself I was being smart, not running away. The parking lot was still dark, just the orange glow of the sodium lights making long shadows between the cars, and I could hear his footsteps behind me on the asphalt, steady and unhurried like he knew exactly where this was going. I reached my truck, fumbling with my keys while trying to keep an eye on him, and that's when I noticed my back right tire was completely flat, slashed clean through the sidewall in a perfect diagonal cut. Then I saw the back left, same thing, and I knew without looking the front tires would be the same. This sick feeling spreading through my chest as I realized he'd gone out to the parking lot while I was still inside, probably right after our first confrontation. He stopped about 10 feet away, still holding that yellow DeWalt box like a trophy, and pulled out a folded piece of paper from his pocket, waving it at me with that same calm expression. It was my registration from the glove compartment, and I knew right then he'd been in my truck, touched my stuff, probably went through everything while I was inside bleeding on the Home Depot floor. My insurance card was probably in his pocket too, with my home address printed right there in black and white. He walked closer, slow and deliberate, until he was standing right next to me at my driver's side door, and I could see every detail of his face in the ugly orange light, the acne scars on his left cheek, the gray starting to show in his stubble, the way his pupils looked too small even in the darkness. He told me real quiet that he knew where I lived now, knew I stayed on Oakwood Drive, even said my house number like he was reading it off my registration, and suggested maybe I should just forget this whole thing happened. Then he reached out and patted my shoulder, gentle almost like we were old friends, and said he'd hate for this to escalate any further, especially since he knew exactly where to find me if he wanted to continue our conversation later. The way he said conversation made my skin prickle, and I just stood there, couldn't move, couldn't speak, watching him walk away toward a beat-up white van parked a few rows over. He tossed the drill set in the back, climbed in the driver's seat, and pulled out slow, even using his turn signal like a normal person, while I stood there next to my truck with 4 slashed tires and blood still dripping from my mouth. But then he didn't leave, just circled back around through the parking lot, and I saw the van's headlights sweep across me as he pulled up right behind my truck, blocking me in completely. He sat there with the engine running, just watching me through his windshield, and I could see his silhouette in the driver's seat, not moving, just sitting there like he had all the time in the world. Tried to act like I was calling someone, holding my phone to my ear, but my battery was dead because I'd been using it all morning to check Black Friday deals, and I was basically just talking to nobody, hoping he couldn't tell from where he was sitting. After maybe 2 minutes that felt like 2 hours, he rolled down his window and yelled out asking if I needed a ride home, his voice carrying this fake concern that made me want to throw up. And when I didn't answer, he laughed, this deep belly laugh that echoed off the empty cars around us. Then he put the van in reverse, backed up just enough to clear my truck, and sat there again, engine still running, waiting for something I couldn't figure out. I finally decided to just walk back into the store, maybe find security, or at least be around other people. But the moment I took a step away from my truck, he gunned the engine, not moving but revving it loud enough that I jumped back. He did this every time I tried to move, like some sick game, keeping me pinned there next to my useless truck while other shoppers loaded their cars all around us, nobody paying attention to the guy with the bloody mouth trapped by some maniac in a van. Then suddenly he was out of the van and walking toward me again, fast this time, and before I could react he had me pressed against my truck door, one hand on my throat, not squeezing hard but just enough to let me know he could. His face was inches from mine, and I could smell coffee and something sour on his breath when he told me he'd changed his mind about letting this go, that maybe he'd swing by my house later that night, check out what other tools I had in my garage. He grabbed my wallet from my back pocket while he had me pinned, flipped through it right there in front of me, and made a show of memorizing my driver's license before tossing it on the ground. Then he did something that still makes me sick to think about. Pulled out his own phone and took a picture of me standing there against my truck, blood all over my face, looking absolutely destroyed, and said he wanted something to remember our Black Friday shopping trip together. He backed away slowly, keeping his eyes on me the whole time, and told me I had 2 choices. Either I could call the cops and explain how I got my ass kicked over a drill, maybe have him show up at my house while I was at work next week, or I could chalk this up to a bad morning and move on with my life. The threat wasn't even subtle, and the worst part was how reasonable he made it sound, like he was doing me a favor by giving me options, and I knew right then that calling the police would just make everything worse, because this guy was clearly not afraid of consequences. He got back in his van, started it up again, and this time actually drove away, but not before stopping at the parking lot exit to give me a little wave, like we were buddies who'd just had coffee together. I stood there for another 20 minutes, waiting to make sure he was really gone, then called Nathan to come get me, making up some story about vandals slashing my tires because I couldn't even begin to explain what had really happened. I never went back to that Home Depot, never finished my basement renovation, and ended up selling my house 6 months later because I couldn't sleep, knowing that Psycho knew where I lived. Nathan helped me move to a place across town, a little apartment with good locks and security cameras, and I told everyone it was because the commute was better, but really I just needed to be somewhere that Guy couldn't find me. The dental work cost me $4,000 even with insurance, 3 crowns and a root canal. And every time I look in the mirror, I can still see where my teeth don't quite match the originals. These little reminders of the morning I learned what people are really capable of over a 70% discount. Sometimes I drive past Home Depot on Black Friday, just to see the crowds gathering in the dark, all those people thinking they're going to score some amazing deal, and I want to tell them that no amount of savings is worth what might be waiting for them in that parking lot. I know that guy is probably still out there, probably pulled the same thing on other people, maybe worse. And the thing that keeps me up at night isn't just what he did, but how easy it was for him, how he'd clearly done it before and would definitely do it again. Every year, my wife asks me why I refuse to shop on Black Friday, and every year I tell her the same thing. Crowds make me nervous. She thinks I'm being dramatic, but she wasn't there in 2016 when everything went sideways at that electronics store on Riverside Boulevard. I'd just turned 31 that October, still naive enough to think saving 40% on a laptop was worth camping outside a store at 4 in the morning with my buddy Craig. We'd brought folding chairs, thermoses of coffee, even a portable phone charger, thinking we were so prepared for the 5-hour wait ahead of us. Craig kept joking about how his girlfriend would finally stop complaining about his ancient computer once he scored that doorbuster deal, and I laughed along, completely unaware that in less than 2 hours, I'd be running for my life. Around 5:30, when the parking lot started filling up and the line stretched past the nail salon 3 stores down, this guy showed up in a black pea coat and just walked right to the front like the rest of us weren't even there, not behind the last person in line, not even trying to blend in somewhere in the middle, but straight to the glass doors where the first 10 people had been waiting since midnight. Everyone started grumbling. A few people called out to him, but he just stood there with his hands in his pockets, staring at his reflection in the storefront window. Something about his posture, the way his shoulders stayed perfectly square while everyone else was shifting from foot to foot in the cold, made my chest tighten. Craig nudged me and whispered that someone should say something, and before I could tell him to leave it alone, my mouth was already opening, already calling out to the guy that there was a line, that people had been waiting for hours. He turned around slow, real slow, like he had all the time in the world. First thing I noticed were his eyes, pale gray like dirty ice, and the way they didn't blink once while he stared at me. He was maybe 6'2", built like someone who spent time in a gym but not for show, more like someone who lifted heavy things because they needed to be moved. His face had this weird smoothness to it, no stubble, no wrinkles, just flat pale skin stretched tight over sharp bones. He took 3 steps toward me, each one deliberate, his dress shoes clicking on the asphalt, and I remember thinking how strange it was that he was wearing dress shoes to a Black Friday sale. When he stopped about 2 feet from me, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something medicinal and sharp like hospital disinfectant mixed with pine, he tilted his head and asked if I had a problem with where he was standing. My whole body knew I should back down, every instinct screaming at me to just say no, sorry, my mistake. But 40 other people were watching, and Craig was right there beside me, and my stupid pride wouldn't let me fold. I told him, yeah, actually, I did have a problem. That cutting in line wasn't cool when families had been waiting in the freezing cold since midnight. The words came out steadier than I felt, but I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, this rapid thudding that seemed way too loud. He smiled then, not with his whole face, just his mouth pulling back to show teeth that were too white, too straight, like dentures on someone too young to need them. Then his right hand came up fast, faster than I could process, and connected with my jaw in this perfect uppercut that snapped my head back and sent me stumbling backward into Craig, who caught me just before I hit the pavement. The taste of copper filled my mouth, and I could feel warmth running down my chin where my teeth had cut into my lip. People were shouting, someone's kid started crying, and Craig was yelling something about calling the cops while helping me stand back up. My vision was swimming a little, these black spots dancing at the edges, but I could see the guy in the pea coat clearly enough as he reached into his coat with his left hand. Time does this weird stretching thing in moments like that, where a second feels like a full minute, and I watched his hand disappear into the inner pocket and come back out holding a Glock, the metal catching the parking lot lights. He held it low at first, casual almost, like he was just showing it to me, then raised it up and swept it across the crowd, making this slow arc from left to right. People scattered, grabbed their kids, dove behind cars, and the whole organized line just dissolved into chaos. He walked toward me while everyone else ran, the gun hanging loose in his hand but pointed in my general direction, and his face never changed expression, just that same empty smile. He said something about respect, about people needing to mind their own business, but I wasn't really processing words anymore, just watching that black metal piece swinging slightly as he moved. Craig had let go of me and backed away with his hands up, and I stood there alone, blood dripping onto my sneakers, trying to figure out if I was about to die over a spot in line at a Black Friday sale. Behind him, I could see the automatic doors starting to slide open, the employees inside scrambling, some running deeper into the store while others pressed against the windows to see what was happening. The guy must have noticed my eyes shift because he turned slightly to look, and that half second when his attention moved was all I needed to break into a sprint toward those open doors. I made it maybe 20 feet into the store, past the security sensors and into the main corridor with all the Black Friday displays, when I heard the first shot. The sound was different than in movies, more like a sharp crack followed by this ringing echo that bounced off the walls and made everyone drop to the floor. Ceiling tiles rained down in white chunks, and I could hear the fluorescent light above me sparking where the bullet had gone through. I kept running, weaving between displays of discounted tablets and Bluetooth speakers, my sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. His voice carried over the screaming, clear and calm, calling out that he just wanted to talk, that I needed to stop making this difficult. A second shot went off, this one hitting a television display to my right, the screen exploding in a shower of glass and plastic that cut into my arm as I passed. I could hear his dress shoes behind me, that same measured clicking, not running but walking with purpose like he knew exactly where I was going. The bathroom sign appeared like salvation at the end of aisle 7, one of those family restrooms with the heavy lock on the inside. I slammed through the door and turned the deadbolt, just as his shadow appeared in the gap at the bottom. My chest was burning, each breath like trying to suck air through a wet cloth, and I could feel my pulse in my neck, my temples, even my fingertips. The door handle rattled once, twice, then stopped. His voice came through muffled but still unnervingly calm, saying my friend Craig had told him my name was Jason, asking if I preferred Jay or the full version. I backed away from the door until I hit the far wall, then slid down to sit on the cold tile, trying to make myself as small as possible. The fluorescent light above me hummed and flickered, casting these irregular shadows that made everything look like it was moving. For maybe 30 seconds, there was complete silence except for the distant sounds of panic from the main store. Then I heard him walking away, those dress shoes getting fainter. I stayed in that bathroom for what felt like hours but was probably only 15 minutes, sitting on that gross floor with my knees pulled up to my chest, listening. Every sound made me jump. The automatic paper towel dispenser randomly activating, the toilet running, footsteps from the store that could have been anyone. Then came the sirens, first one, then 3, then what sounded like every cop car in the city converging on the parking lot. Red and blue lights flashed through the small window near the ceiling, painting the walls in alternating colors. I could hear radios crackling, officers shouting commands, The mechanical voice of someone on a megaphone telling everyone to exit calmly with their hands visible. Part of me wanted to leave right then, to run out and find safety with the police, but my legs wouldn't work, just stayed locked in place like they'd forgotten how to support weight. It took 2 officers knocking on the bathroom door, identifying themselves, showing badges through the crack, before I finally managed to stand up and turn that deadbolt. They took me out through the loading dock in the back, avoiding the main store where crime scene tape was already going up. One officer, a woman with short auburn hair and kind eyes, kept asking if I was hurt while a paramedic shined a light in my eyes and cleaned the cuts on my arm. I told them everything: the line cutting, the punch, the gun, the shots fired, how he knew my name. They wrote it all down, asked me to repeat parts, took photos of my swollen jaw and bloody shirt. Craig was there too, sitting on the bumper of an ambulance, and he looked worse than me even though he hadn't been touched, just pale and shaky like he might throw up any second. He kept apologizing for telling the guy my name, said the man had grabbed his shoulder and squeezed until he answered, that those gray eyes had looked right through him. The detective, an older guy with a coffee stain on his tie, said they'd found shell casings but no shooter, that he'd probably fled when he heard the sirens approaching. They had me look at security footage on a laptop trying to get a clear image of his face, but every shot was either too blurry or at the wrong angle, like the cameras had been specifically avoided. Around noon, after they'd finally said I could go, I walked with Craig back to the parking lot to get my car, a beat-up Ford Focus I'd bought after college. The lot was mostly empty now, just a few police cars and some yellow tape fluttering in the wind. My car was sitting right where I'd left it, next to the light pole in Section C, looking completely normal except for one thing. There was a piece of paper tucked under the windshield wiper. My first thought was it was a police notice or maybe information about victim services, but when I got closer, I saw it was just a receipt from the store, time-stamped from that morning. I pulled it out and turned it over, and written on the back in neat block letters was, "Should have minded your business, Jason." Craig saw it at the same time I did, and immediately started pulling me back toward the police. But then one of the officers who was collecting evidence called out to us, asked what we'd found. When I showed him the note, his whole demeanor changed, and he radioed for the detective to come back immediately. They reviewed more footage then, hours and hours of it, and that's when they found him on camera from the afternoon, around 3:30, walking through the parking lot again, hands in those same pockets, that same measured stride. The timestamp showed he'd been there for almost 40 minutes, just standing behind a minivan 2 spaces from my car, occasionally stepping out to look toward the store entrance, then going back to his hiding spot. The last frame before the camera cycled to another view, you could see him pull something from his coat, and even though the image was grainy, the detective zoomed in enough to make out the outline of the gun in his hand. They kept my car as evidence, said they'd have officers drive by my apartment regularly, gave me a case number and told me to call if I saw anything suspicious. Craig's mom came to pick us up, and she drove me home in silence while Craig sat in the back seat, neither of us saying what we were both thinking, that this guy knew my name, had my license plate, and had waited for hours with a weapon just to make his point. I changed my locks that night, bought security cameras the next day, and for months afterward I'd catch myself checking every parking lot for a black peacoat, listening for those deliberate footsteps, wondering if he was still out there, still angry that someone had dared to challenge him over a place in line. When my younger sister got engaged in October of 2015, she asked me to be her maid of honor and gave me a picture of this rose gold Michael Kors watch she wanted all the bridesmaids to wear. Matching accessories, the whole deal. Problem was, the thing cost $200 and I was barely scraping by on my pharmacy tech salary. But then I saw Macy's was doing this massive Black Friday sale, and that exact watch was going to be marked down to $70. $70. I set 3 alarms, mapped out my route through the store, and convinced my roommate Vanessa to come with me for moral support. She thought I was insane, said Black Friday shopping was for people with a death wish, but I promised her breakfast after, and she caved. I remember being weirdly excited about it, like it was some kind of mission. Get in, grab the watch, get out. Simple. We got to the mall at 4 in the morning and the parking lot already looked like a disaster movie. Cars everywhere, people speed walking toward the entrance with this wild look in their eyes. The second those doors opened, it was chaos. Pure, unfiltered chaos. People were shoving, carts were ramming into each other, and someone knocked over an entire display of perfume bottles that shattered across the floor. Vanessa grabbed my arm and said we should just leave, but I was locked in. I needed that watch. We fought our way to the jewelry section, and I swear it felt like swimming upstream through a river of desperate shoppers. When we finally got there, I saw it. One rose gold Michael Kors watch left on the display table, marked down with a big red sticker. My heart was pounding. I reached out, my fingers were maybe 2 inches away from it, and that's when I felt it. Someone grabbed a fistful of my hair from behind and yanked me backwards so hard I thought my scalp was going to rip off. I stumbled, completely off balance, and before I could even process what was happening, I felt myself falling backward into something solid. The glass display case. The sound it made when I hit it was this sick, splintering crack, and then everything just exploded. Shards went everywhere. I felt this immediate burning sensation across both my arms, and when I looked down, there was blood. So much blood. Deep gashes running from my wrists up to my elbows. The skin just split open like someone had taken a razor to it. I tried to get up, tried to turn around to see who had done this, but the woman was already on top of me. She was maybe in her 40s, blonde hair tied back in a ponytail, wearing a purple North Face knockoff jacket, and her face was twisted into this expression I had never seen on another human being before. Pure rage. Her eyes were bulging, spit flying from her mouth as she screamed something I could not make out over the noise of the crowd. Vanessa was yelling, trying to pull the woman off me, but she would not budge. I still had the watch clutched in my right hand, because somehow, even while falling, I had managed to grab it. The woman saw it. Her eyes locked onto my fist, and she lunged. I felt her teeth sink into the back of my hand before I even understood what she was doing. She bit down hard, right on my index finger near the knuckle. The pain was unreal, white hot and sharp like someone was drilling into the bone. I screamed, and I mean really screamed, the kind of sound I did not know I could make. I tried to shake her off, tried to pry her jaw open with my other hand, but she just bit down harder. I felt something pop, felt warm blood gushing down my wrist, and when I finally looked, I could see bone. Actual bone. My finger was hanging on by what looked like a thin strip of skin and tendon. The watch fell from my hand and hit the floor, and that's when she finally let go. She snatched it up like some kind of animal grabbing prey, and for a second, I thought it was over. But then she turned back to me and her mouth was covered in my blood, dripping down her chin, staining her teeth. She leaned in close, so close I could smell the coffee on her breath mixed with the metallic tang of blood, and she said, "I'm going to find you in the parking lot." Not yelled it, said it. Calm and deliberate, like she was telling me the weather forecast. Then she repeated it louder. "I'm going to find you in the parking lot, you stupid bitch." Security finally showed up, 2 guys in yellow vests who looked absolutely horrified. They grabbed her arms, tried to pull her away, but she kept screaming, kept pointing at me. "That's mine. She stole it from me. I'm going to kill her." Over and over, even as they dragged her toward the exit. People had their phones out, recording everything. Some were just standing there with their mouths open. Nobody helped. Nobody did anything until it was already done. Vanessa wrapped her jacket around my arms to try and stop the bleeding, but it was not working. The cuts were too deep. My hand was throbbing, the finger just dangling there, and I started feeling dizzy, really dizzy. The store manager came over with a first aid kit, but one look at my hand and he just said, "We need an ambulance." I remember sitting on the floor, leaning against a checkout counter, staring at the blood pooling around me and thinking how stupid this all was. How absolutely insane it was that I almost died over a $70 watch. The paramedics arrived maybe 10 minutes later, though it felt like hours. They wrapped my hand in gauze, put pressure bandages on my arms, and loaded me onto a stretcher. Vanessa rode with me in the ambulance, holding my good hand the whole time, and I could tell she was trying not to cry. I kept apologizing to her. I don't even know why. I just kept saying sorry over and over. They took me to Mercy General, and the emergency room was packed. Apparently, Black Friday is a nightmare for hospitals too. Lots of trampling injuries, heart attacks, people getting into fistfights over discounted televisions. I got bumped up the line because of how bad my hand looked. A doctor came in, this older guy with gray hair and glasses, and he did not sugarcoat anything. He said the bite had severed the tendon completely, fractured the bone, and there was significant tissue damage. They were going to try to save the finger, but I needed surgery immediately. He also said I would need a rabies shot and antibiotics because human bites are apparently worse than animal bites. Something about the bacteria in our mouths being disgusting. They wheeled me into pre-op, gave me something for the pain that made everything feel floaty and distant, and I remember staring at the ceiling tiles, counting them, trying to focus on anything except what had just happened. Vanessa stayed in the waiting room. She texted me before they put me under, said the police wanted to talk to me after the surgery. When I woke up, my hand was wrapped in this massive bandage that looked like a boxing glove. The doctor told me the surgery went well, that they reattached the tendon and pinned the bone, but I would need months of physical therapy. Maybe never get full mobility back. I was still groggy, still processing everything, when a nurse came in and handed me my phone. She said Vanessa had left it with her before going to move my car to a better spot in the parking garage. I unlocked it, planning to text my sister and tell her I would not be making Thanksgiving dinner, and that's when I saw them. 3 photos. No number attached, just an unknown contact. The first photo was of my car, my blue Mazda sedan parked in the hospital lot under a streetlight. The second photo was closer. My tires. All 4 of them slashed, completely flat, rubber shredded like someone had gone at them with a knife. And the third photo was of my windshield, a piece of paper tucked under the wiper blade. I could not read what it said in the photo, but I did not need to. The message that came with the pictures told me everything. Should have given me the watch. That was it. 5 words. I felt my chest tighten, felt this wave of panic crash over me that made the pain in my hand seem like nothing. She had followed me. Followed the ambulance, somehow figured out where I was, found my car in the parking lot, and destroyed it. And she had taken photos, sent them to me, which meant she had my phone number. I started shaking so badly that I dropped the phone on the bed. The nurse must have seen the look on my face because she asked if I was okay, if I needed her to call someone. I could not even answer. My throat felt like it was closing up. All I could think about was that woman's face. Her blood-covered mouth, the way she had said she would find me. And she had. She actually had. I hit the call button about 15 times until a different nurse came running in, and I just showed her the phone. Showed her the pictures. She went pale, immediately called security, and within minutes there were 2 hospital security guards in my room, asking me questions I could barely answer. They called the police and 2 officers showed up maybe 20 minutes later. I told them everything, showed them the photos, told them about the attack at Macy's, gave them the best description I could of the woman. Purple jacket, blonde ponytail, maybe 5'6", stocky build, that crazed look in her eyes. One of the officers wrote everything down while the other one went to check on my car. When he came back, his expression told me it was bad. He said the tires were definitely slashed, and the note under the windshield said the same thing as the text. Should have given me the watch, written in black Sharpie on a torn piece of cardboard. He also said they found scratches on the driver's side door, like someone had keyed it, and the side mirror was smashed. The officer asked if I had any idea how she got my phone number, and I did not. I still don't. Maybe she saw it somewhere during the chaos. Maybe someone at the store gave it to her. I have no idea. All I knew was that this woman was not done with me. The police reviewed the security footage from Macy's and the hospital parking garage. They said they had clear images of her face, her license plate, everything they needed. Turns out she had been arrested twice before for assault, once at a grocery store in 2013, once at a department store in 2014, both times over sale items. Both times she had attacked someone and walked away. The officers told me they were issuing a warrant for her arrest, that she would be charged with aggravated assault, stalking, destruction of property, and probably a few other things. They assigned an officer to guard my hospital room for the rest of the night, and they told Vanessa not to go back to the parking garage alone. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that woman's face, heard her voice, felt her teeth. The next morning, they discharged me with a stack of prescriptions and instructions for wound care. Vanessa drove me home in her car because mine was completely undrivable. I kept checking my phone the whole ride, terrified I would get another message, another photo, but nothing came. 2 days later, the police called. They had arrested her. Found her at her apartment in some suburb about 40 minutes from the mall. When they searched the place, they found the watch. My watch. Still in the Macy's bag with the receipt, sitting on her kitchen counter like some kind of trophy. They also found a folder, and this part still makes me sick to think about. Inside the folder were printed screenshots, pictures of my Facebook profile, my Instagram, photos of my apartment building that she must have taken herself. She had been planning something. I don't know what, and I don't want to know. The officer said she would be held without bail because of her prior record and the severity of the charges. He also said I would need to testify at the trial, which I did 6 months later. She got 4 years in prison. 4 years for nearly biting my finger off, for stalking me, for doing God knows what she was planning to do. My finger healed, sort of. It is permanently crooked now, and I cannot bend it all the way. I have scars running up both arms that look like someone drew jagged lines with a red pen. I never went Black Friday shopping again. Never will. And I bought my sister a different watch for the wedding, paid full price at a regular store on a regular Wednesday afternoon. She understood. Everyone understood. But sometimes I still get this feeling, like when I am in a crowded store or walking through a parking lot at night, that someone is watching me. That someone is going to grab my hair and yank me backward. It has been years, and she is still in prison as far as I know, but that feeling never really goes away. Anyone who's worked retail knows Black Friday is hell, but what happened to me during the 2017 sale turned into something way worse than dealing with angry customers fighting over discounted TVs. I'd been working at Penny's for about 8 months at that point, ever since dropping out of college the previous spring when my dad got sick, and I needed to help with bills. The job wasn't glamorous, mostly restocking shelves and running a register in the men's department, but it paid enough to cover my half of rent in the apartment I shared with my roommate Austin. The store had this policy where we all had to wear name tags with our full first names printed in big letters, which I never thought twice about until that night. Management scheduled me for the nightmare shift. 2 p.m. to 2 a.m., 12 straight hours of scanning items and fake smiling at exhausted shoppers while my feet screamed inside my non-slip shoes. The guy first came through my line around 4 p.m., right when the initial wave of doorbuster hunters had cleared out, and the steady stream of evening shoppers started trickling in. He was probably in his mid-40s, average height, thinning brown hair combed sideways across his scalp in that way some men do when they're fighting baldness, wearing khaki pants and a gray pullover sweater that looked too warm for inside the store. What struck me immediately was how he maintained eye contact the entire transaction, not in a normal, being polite to the cashier way, but in this intense, unblinking way that made my neck feel hot. He bought a single pack of socks, white athletic socks, the cheapest ones we carried, which seemed weird for someone shopping on Black Friday when everything good was on sale. When I told him his total was $467, he handed me a $5 bill, but kept his fingers on it for a second too long after I grabbed it, so we were both holding the money at the same time. "You have really nice hands," he said, his voice soft and oddly gentle, almost tender. Very delicate fingers. "Do you play piano?" I just laughed it off with some non-committal response and gave him his change, watching as he took his small bag and walked toward the exit, though I noticed he stopped near the cologne display and seemed to just stand there, not looking at products, just standing. He came back through my line at 5:30 p.m. Same guy, same unsettling stare, this time buying a single greeting card, one of those generic thinking of you cards with flowers on the front. The store was getting more crowded as people got off work and came in for the extended sale hours, so I had a line of 6 or 7 people behind him, all looking impatient and tired. "Hi again," he said, like we were old friends, and then he did this thing where he tilted his head slightly and smiled, but only with his mouth, not his eyes. "Busy night for you, huh? You must be exhausted, working so hard." He said my name then, Mallory, reading it off my name tag but saying it slowly, like he was tasting each syllable. I scanned his card, told him the price, and he paid with exact change this time. Coins he counted out one by one into my palm, his fingertips brushing my skin with each quarter and dime. The woman behind him in line huffed loudly, annoyed at how long he was taking. After he left, I helped the rest of my customers on autopilot, but I kept glancing up between transactions, scanning the store floor, and sure enough, I spotted him about 20 feet away, standing near a display of discounted luggage, phone in his hand, just watching my register. The third time he appeared was around 7 p.m., and that's when my stomach started to genuinely hurt. He bought a travel-size bottle of hand lotion this time, and when I scanned it, he said, "I was reading that cashiers get really dry hands from handling money and receipts all day. The paper absorbs the moisture from your skin. I thought maybe you could use this." He slid the bottle back across the counter toward me after I'd bagged it. "It's for you, actually. A gift." My throat went tight and I managed to say, "I can't accept gifts from customers, but thank you," and pushed it back toward him. My co-worker, this older woman named Beverly, who worked the register next to mine, glanced over with a concerned look. The man just smiled again, that same disconnected smile, and took the lotion back. "That's okay. I understand. There are rules." Then he leaned in slightly, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something heavy and woody that made my eyes water, and said quietly, "I saw on your Facebook that you're studying to be a veterinarian. That's really admirable. Animals are pure souls, not like people." He said it so casually, like he was commenting on the weather, and then he walked away before I could even process what he'd just said. I hadn't been on Facebook in weeks, rarely posted anything, and my privacy settings were set to friends only, I was sure of it. But he'd somehow found me, scrolled through my profile, learned things about me. During my 15-minute break at 7:30, I practically ran to the bathroom and checked my phone with shaking fingers, going through my privacy settings 3 times, changing everything to private, even my profile picture. When I returned to my register, Beverly pulled me aside near the customer service desk, her face serious in that concerned mom way she had sometimes. "That man who keeps coming through your line, the one with the sweater, he's been standing in the home goods section for the past 20 minutes just staring at you. I timed it. He's not shopping, not browsing, just standing there watching." "I already told Calvin," she meant our floor manager, a useless 24-year-old who'd gotten promoted because his uncle was district supervisor. Beverly suggested I take my lunch break early and she'd cover my register. Maybe the guy would get bored and leave. I wanted to hug her. I clocked out for my 30-minute lunch at 8:15 and went to the break room in the back, past the storage area where they kept overstock and the time clock. The break room was depressing as always. Fluorescent lights buzzing, old refrigerator humming, a table with mismatched chairs and a couch that smelled like old French fries. I sat there eating the sandwich I'd packed that morning, turkey and cheese that had gone warm and soggy in my locker, trying to calm down by scrolling through Instagram, looking at pictures of my friend Kelsey's dog, anything to feel normal. But my leg wouldn't stop bouncing under the table, and I kept checking the time on my phone every 2 minutes, dreading going back out to the floor. My lunch ended at 8:45, and I walked back through the storage area, past the rows of metal shelving units stacked with boxes, and that's when I saw him. He was there, in the storage area, employees only, looking at boxes of inventory like he was supposed to be there. My entire body went cold but also hot at the same time, like a wave of electricity. "How did you get back here?" I asked, trying to sound authoritative, but my voice came out thin and uncertain. He turned slowly, and he had that smile again. "The door was open. I was looking for the restroom and got turned around. This store is like a maze, isn't it, Mallory?" He said my name again, that same deliberate way. "You should probably head back out to the sales floor," I said, gesturing toward the door, trying to position myself so I wasn't trapped between him and the shelves. He nodded agreeably, too agreeably, and walked past me. But as he did, he said, almost in a whisper, "Your roommate Austin seems like a good guy. Does he go to the gym on Lincoln Avenue? I think I've seen his car there, the blue Mazda with the dent in the back bumper." Then he was gone, pushing through the door back into the store, and I just stood there among the boxes, my heart absolutely hammering. Because how did he know about Austin, about his car, about where Austin worked out? I found Calvin near the electronics department, talking to another employee about some pricing issue, and I interrupted them, not caring if I was being rude. I explained everything quickly, the multiple visits, the Facebook comments, him being in the employee area, the things he knew about Austin. Calvin listened with this expression that I can only describe as mildly concerned, but mostly inconvenienced, like I was telling him about a slightly malfunctioning register. "Did he threaten you?" he asked. "Did he say anything explicitly threatening or touch you inappropriately?" When I said no, not exactly, he just nodded and said he'd keep an eye out, and if the guy came back through my line, I should call for a manager immediately. That was it. No offer to call security, no suggestion to file a police report, nothing. He actually said, "It's Black Friday, we get all kinds of weird customers. Just stay professional and let me know if it escalates." I wanted to scream at him that it had already escalated, that this wasn't some confused shopper, but I could see in his face that he'd already moved on mentally to the next problem. Beverly was more helpful. When I told her what Calvin said, she rolled her eyes so hard I thought they'd get stuck. She suggested I ask to work in the stockroom for the rest of my shift, away from the registers. But we both knew that wouldn't fly on the busiest shopping night of the year, when they needed every register open. The next few hours were torture. Every time someone approached my register, my whole body tensed, expecting to see him again. I kept scanning the store between customers, looking for that gray sweater, that unsettling stare. Around 10:30 p.m., the crowd started thinning out. Most families with kids had gone home, and we were left with the hardcore deal hunters and people who worked late shifts coming in on their way home. My feet were killing me, both arches cramping, and I developed this tension headache that made my vision pulse slightly at the edges. That's when he came through my line for the fourth time. He had a small picture frame this time, the kind you'd put a 4:6 photo in, silver-colored metal with a simple border. He placed it on the counter gently, deliberately, and then he placed something else next to it, a printed photograph. I looked down at it, and my vision actually went blurry for a second. It was a picture of me, taken from across the store earlier that evening. I could tell by what I was wearing and the angle. Taken from somewhere near the home goods section, where Beverly said he'd been standing. In the photo, I was mid-transaction with a customer, looking down at the register screen, completely unaware I was being photographed. "I thought you might want this," he said conversationally, like he was offering me a coupon. "You look very focused, very dedicated to your work. It's admirable." My mouth had gone completely dry and I couldn't make words come out for several seconds. "I need you to leave," I finally managed, my voice shaking but louder than I intended. "Right now. Leave the store." People in line behind him were staring now, sensing something was wrong. He didn't get angry or defensive. Instead, he looked almost hurt, wounded, like I'd said something deeply unfair. "I'm a paying customer," he said quietly. "I just wanted to buy a frame. Is there a problem?" That's when Beverly appeared beside me. Must have seen the situation from her register. "Sir, you need to leave immediately or I'm calling the police," she said firmly, already pulling her phone from her pocket. He looked between us for a long moment, that strange smile flickering at the corners of his mouth, and then he simply turned and walked away, leaving the frame and the photograph on my counter. Beverly grabbed both items immediately, touching them only by the edges, and we took them straight to Calvin, who finally seemed to grasp that this was serious. He called mall security, who took a statement from me and Beverly, took the photograph as evidence, and said they'd review security camera footage to get a clear image of the man. They walked the entire store with us, but he was gone, completely vanished. One security guard, an older guy named Tom who I'd seen around before, suggested I have someone walk me to my car when my shift ended, and maybe consider filing a police report in the morning. Guys like this, they usually back off once they know you're taking it seriously. "Documenting everything," he said, trying to be reassuring, but his eyes told a different story. The last hour and a half of my shift dragged by in this awful state of hyper-awareness. Every sound made me jump. Every customer who approached my register made my pulse spike. Beverly stayed close, checking on me every few minutes, and I loved her for it, even though I barely knew her outside of work. When 2 a.m. finally came and the store closed, the managers made announcements over the intercom for customers to bring their final purchases to the registers. We processed the last few stragglers, people clutching discounted blenders and stacks of towels, and then began the closing procedures, counting our drawers, printing end-of-day reports, shutting down the registers. The store slowly emptied of employees, everyone exhausted and ready to get home. Beverly offered to walk out with me, but she'd parked in the front lot near the main entrance because she'd arrived early for her shift, and I was in the employee lot and back, the far corner past the loading docks where they made us park so customers could have the closer spots. She made me promise to text her when I got home safely, and I promised I would. I grabbed my jacket and purse from my locker, pulled on my coat because November nights in Ohio get brutally cold, and headed out the back employee entrance with 2 other co-workers who were parked nearby, a guy from receiving named Todd, and a girl from cosmetics whose name I didn't know. The employee parking lot was basically empty at that hour, just a handful of cars scattered across the cracked asphalt under these tall yellow security lights that created these pools of sickly illumination with deep shadows in between. Todd and the cosmetics girl peeled off toward their cars near the side fence, calling out "good night," their voices echoing in the cold stillness, and then I was alone, walking across the lot toward my beat-up Honda Accord parked in the far corner, keys already in my hand because every woman knows you have your keys ready, positioned between your fingers like they taught us in that one self-defense assembly back in high school. The air smelled like exhaust and old snow and fryer grease from the fast food places in the strip mall next door. My breath came out in visible puffs and my footsteps sounded too loud on the pavement. When I was about 15 feet from my car, I saw him. He was standing on the passenger side of my car, just standing there in that same gray sweater, hands in his pockets, like he'd been waiting patiently the entire time. The security lights behind him cast his face partially in shadow, but I could see he was smiling. My whole body locked up and I stopped walking, every muscle rigid, car keys digging into my palm. "Mallory," he said, his voice carrying across the empty space between us. "I wanted to make sure you got home safe. It's late and this parking lot isn't very well lit. A young woman alone at this hour, anything could happen." The way he said it, so calm and reasonable, like he was being helpful, like this was a perfectly normal thing to do, made everything feel surreal and wrong. "You need to leave," I said, and my voice sounded stronger than I felt, probably because terror was giving way to anger, this burning rage that he'd made me feel afraid in my own workplace, that he'd followed me, researched me, invaded every boundary. "I'm calling the police right now." I pulled my phone from my jacket pocket with my left hand, keeping my keys in my right, and I actually started dialing 911, my thumb shaking but determined. He took a step toward me, and I took 2 steps back, maintaining distance. "You don't need to do that," he said, and for the first time his voice had an edge to it, something sharp underneath the softness. "I'm not trying to scare you. I just think we have a connection. You felt it too, I know you did. When I came through your line that first time, the way you looked at me," he was rewriting reality, creating some imaginary interaction that had never happened, and the delusion in his voice terrified me more than anything else had all night. The 911 operator answered, a woman's voice asking about my emergency, and I started talking fast, giving the address, saying there was a man following me, that I needed police immediately. He heard me talking to the operator and something changed in his expression, the smile finally dropping away, replaced by this cold blankness. He stared at me for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 10 or 15 seconds, and then he turned and walked away, not rushed, just walked across the parking lot toward a dark sedan parked near the loading dock that I hadn't even noticed before, got in, and drove away slowly, headlights coming on as he exited onto the main road. The police arrived maybe 6 minutes later, 2 officers in separate cruisers, and I was still standing in the same spot, phone clutched in my hand, unable to make myself walk to my car even though he was gone. I gave them the whole story, everything from the first transaction to the parking lot, and they took it seriously, actually listened, took notes, got the photograph and frame from mall security as evidence. They pulled security footage from the store cameras and got clear images of his face, ran the plate number from the dark sedan that the loading dock camera had captured. Turns out he had a record, 2 prior incidents in different counties involving following women from retail locations, restraining orders filed against him by a woman in 2014 and another in 2016. The detective who called me 3 days later said they'd identified him, issued a warrant, and arrested him at his apartment in the suburbs. They charged him with stalking, criminal trespassing in the employee area, and harassment. I had to go to court twice, once for a restraining order hearing and once months later when he took a plea deal, and both times I saw him sitting there in a button-down shirt looking so ordinary, so harmless, and it made me sick thinking about how many people probably passed him every day and never suspected anything. I quit Penny's 2 weeks after Black Friday, couldn't stomach going back even though I needed the money. Found a job doing data entry from home where I never had to wear a name tag or interact with strangers face to face. Beverly and I still text sometimes. She checks in every few months. The whole thing taught me to trust my gut, that uncomfortable feeling when something isn't right, and to not worry about being rude or making a scene when someone crosses a line. I wish I'd called the police the second he mentioned my Facebook, or when he appeared in the storage area, instead of waiting until I was alone in a dark parking lot. But I did call them when it mattered most, and that's what got me out of there. He violated his restraining order once, showed up at the coffee shop where Austin worked about 5 months after the court case, just sat there drinking coffee and staring, and the barista called the cops immediately. That violation sent him to jail for 6 months. As far as I know, he hasn't tried to contact me since he got out, but I still check over my shoulder in parking lots, still keep my social media locked down tight, still feel that spike of adrenaline when someone looks at me too long in public spaces. Some experiences just change you permanently, reshape how you move through the world, and that 12-hour Black Friday shift definitely did that for me. A long stretch of retail shifts had me craving a small break from everything, so when Black Friday came around, I decided to hit a big home improvement warehouse right after my early morning errands. My plan wasn't glamorous. Grab a few storage bins, a set of shelves for my tiny laundry room, and a toolbox I'd been eyeing for months. The place was a madhouse the moment I stepped inside. People were squeezing past each other, carts packed high with oversized boxes, voices echoing off the high ceilings like we were all trapped in a metallic canyon. I remember weaving through the aisles thinking about how ridiculous it was that people could get so intense over discounted drills and winter heaters. Still, I was in a decent mood. I had a list, a cart, and a quiet evening waiting for me at home. Nothing about that morning hinted that it was about to take a very different turn. While I stood comparing two different shelving units, both nearly the same size but one with slightly thicker brackets, a man with a faded orange vest approached me from the side. His vest looked older than the ones I had seen other workers wearing that day, the color almost washed out, and one of the pockets was torn like he'd snagged it on something sharp. He spoke with this oddly friendly tone, saying I was looking at the wrong stuff, and that the real deals were in the loading dock area where they kept bulk inventory. I remember blinking at him, trying to figure out how I hadn't noticed that section on the Black Friday ad. He insisted it was where they kept the pallet-sized markdowns, too big to put out on the main floor with the crowds. It sounded strange, but the store was chaotic enough that it didn't immediately raise alarms in my head. I followed him through an aisle that seemed unusually empty compared to the rest of the store. The farther we walked, the colder the air felt, almost like the ventilation back there wasn't meant for customers. I noticed dust collecting on the edges of the shelves, which was odd considering how frantic the rest of the store was. At one point, I asked him how long he'd been working there, trying to make casual conversation, and he answered with a laugh that didn't match anything about his expression. It was this dry, flat sound, like he was pretending to react rather than actually reacting. He pointed toward a set of swinging doors at the end of the row and told me that was the shortcut to the receiving area, where the real bargains were waiting. The moment I pushed through those doors, the noise of the store vanished behind me. No carts banging, no announcements blaring from the speakers, no frantic chatter. Just a massive warehouse space stretching out in dim, uneven lighting. My guide didn't follow me inside. I only realized that after a few steps, when I turned to make a quick comment about a stack of oversized boxes and saw nothing but the swinging doors drifting shut. Something about the silence made my chest feel uncomfortably tight, like the air itself was holding still. I spotted my reflection in a metal panel leaning against a crate, and remember thinking I looked out of place in that huge, empty maze of shelves and pallets. That's when 3 people stepped out from behind a row of tall storage racks, blocking the way forward with this strange, forced sense of confidence, as if they had rehearsed their entrance. The 3 of them stood there like they'd been waiting for me specifically. The guy in front had a shaved head and wore a gray hoodie that looked brand new except for a dark stain near the cuff, and the 2 behind him seemed to hover just a step too close, like they wanted me to know they weren't really letting me leave. The one on the right, a woman with a sharp jawline and short auburn hair, pointed at my cart and said I'd cut in line earlier, that I'd pushed my way through the crowd near the paint section and taken items that didn't belong to me. It sounded absurd, especially because I hadn't even gone near the paint section. I told her she must have mixed me up with someone else, but the man in front shook his head slowly, like I'd just told a lie he already expected. Their expressions didn't show anger exactly. It felt more like they were trying to corner me into compliance, to see if I would hand things over without questioning their claim. I took a small step back, and the echo of my shoe on the concrete floor felt way too loud in that cavernous space. The guy in the hoodie told me to just give them the cart and there wouldn't be any trouble. His voice didn't rise or crack. It stayed calm in this unnerving way, like he had nothing to lose. The woman started circling slightly, angling herself toward my left side, and I felt this sudden awareness of how huge the warehouse was, how the aisles stretched in every direction like a maze. The overhead lights flickered in long intervals, leaving pockets of dimness between sections of brighter lamps. For a second, I considered yelling for help, but the loading area was too far removed from the main store. I doubted anyone would hear me over the constant crashing and clanging of Black Friday chaos. Instead of arguing, I gripped the cart handle and nudged it toward them a bit, pretending I was giving in while keeping my weight shifted like I might bolt. That tiny motion seemed to relax them, just enough for the woman to stop inching closer. She told me to step back and they'd handle the rest. But the moment she turned her eyes toward the cart, I pivoted and darted into the nearest aisle of the warehouse, pushing myself between 2 stacks of boxed garden equipment. The noise of my footsteps bounced around the metal racks, and I could immediately hear them scrambling behind me, their voices rising in frustration. One of them yelled something about me not making it far, which only pushed me to move faster, weaving deeper into the rows. The warehouse aisles were darker than I expected, lit only by sporadic bulbs that hummed like they were on the edge of burning out. Some aisles were cluttered with misplaced pallets, like the staff had abandoned reorganizing weeks ago. I passed a stack of patio umbrellas wrapped in crinkled plastic, then shelves filled with oversized fans tilted at odd angles. Every unfamiliar shape made the shadows look more alive than they were. Behind me, the footsteps grew sharper, echoing in uneven patterns that made it hard to judge how close they were. I tried to stay quiet, to focus on where I was stepping, but the adrenaline made everything feel louder. The scrape of my shoe on concrete, the soft rattle of a loose bolt lying somewhere nearby, even the sound of my own breathing bouncing off the cold walls. I kept moving, hoping the aisles would connect to an exit or a side door, anything that could get me back to the main store without crossing paths with them again. I eventually found myself in a stretch of aisles that felt even more neglected than the rest. Rows of outdated seasonal displays stacked on top of each other, some with faded price tags curling at the corners. A faint draft slipped through from somewhere ahead, carrying the scent of cold air and something metallic, like old machinery. I followed that draft, hoping it meant I was moving toward an exit, but the warehouse layout twisted unpredictably, with random dead ends formed by half-built pallets. My pulse hammered in my ears as I tried to keep track of the voices behind me. They weren't shouting anymore. They were talking low and steady, strategizing, splitting up. The sound of their steps spread through the warehouse in 3 different directions, each echo taking on its own distinct rhythm, making it harder to know which path would lead directly into them. At one point, I rounded a corner and nearly tripped over a stack of metal fixtures left scattered across the floor. As I steadied myself, I noticed a narrow maintenance corridor tucked behind a pile of collapsed cardboard. It was barely wide enough for a person to pass through, and a strip of fluorescent light flickered above it, like it was losing the battle to stay alive. I slipped inside, pressing my back against the cold concrete wall as I listened for movement. For a few seconds, the only sound was the faint buzz of the dying light. Then the heavy footsteps of one of them started closing in from the aisle I'd just left. I could hear the scrape of his shoes as he slowed near the entrance, breathing with this frustrated sharpness, like he expected me to pop out at any second. He hovered there, long enough that I had to fight the urge to breathe too deeply, before muttering something under his breath and stalking away in another direction. The maintenance corridor stretched farther than I expected, eventually leading to a cluster of metal panels and a partially open service door. Through the crack, I could see the vibrant glow of the main store, the overhead lights, the movement of carts, the constant flow of people who had no idea what was happening just a few walls away. That glimpse of normalcy hit me hard. I pushed the door open inch by inch, checking for anyone nearby, half expecting one of the 3 to appear at the last second. When the path looked clear, I slipped out and blended into the aisles behind a display of holiday lights. I kept my head down, moving with the crowds toward the front of the store. Every noise felt sharper, the beeping of registers, the rumble of carts, even the sound of someone tearing a piece of tape. I scanned the area constantly, terrified I'd see one of those 3 faces again. When I finally made it to the parking lot, the daylight felt unnaturally bright after the dim warehouse. I reached my car faster than I probably should have, practically diving inside and locking the doors before catching my breath. I didn't see any of them follow me out. There was no sign of that fake employee vest, no glimpse of the woman with the auburn hair, no trace of the guy with the stained cuff, just regular shoppers loading discounted snowblowers into their trunks. I sat there for a while trying to make sense of everything, wondering if they'd planned that whole setup, or if I'd just been unlucky enough to cross their path. Even now, I avoid the back areas of big stores, sticking close to where people are, where you can hear other voices. Whatever they wanted that day, my cart, my things, or just the chance to corner someone, I'm just glad I didn't find out how far they were willing to go. Most years I tried to avoid the Black Friday chaos, but that day, I had promised myself I'd finally replace a bunch of things in my apartment and pick up some gifts early. By late afternoon, I was carrying more bags than I should have even attempted to manage, and my arms felt like rubber bands ready to snap. I'd been jumping between stores since sunrise, and the crowd just never eased up. By the time I reached the pickup area outside the mall, the cold air hit me like a blessing. I remember trying to balance everything at my feet while waiting for my Uber, wondering how ridiculous I must have looked with bags stacked up to my knees. I just wanted to get home, put everything on the floor, and breathe for a second. The car pulled up, a dark blue SUV with the windows slightly tinted, and the driver leaned across the passenger seat, giving me this enthusiastic wave like he already knew me. His name on the app was Mark, and he looked like a guy in his late 40s with a trimmed beard and a baseball cap that had a faded state logo on the front. Something about him felt like he was trying a little too hard to be friendly, but I chalked it up to holiday stress. When he got out and saw the pile of bags, his eyebrows shot up as if I'd just hauled a treasure chest out of the mall. He started asking questions before we even loaded anything. What I got, which deals I caught, which stores were the best this year. His curiosity felt oddly precise, almost like he was taking inventory. Once everything was finally in the trunk, we settled into the ride, and he kept the conversation laser-focused on my purchases. Not in a casual, holiday shopping way, he wanted details. He asked how much I spent on the electronics, whether the clothes were for me or someone else, which brands I chose, whether anything was limited edition. At first I thought maybe he was just trying to pass the time with small talk, but his tone carried this intensity, like each answer mattered to him on some personal level. Every time I tried to shift the conversation to something lighter, he circled back to the bags. I remember watching the rearview mirror and noticing how often his eyes flicked upward toward me, as if he was trying to read my expressions along with my answers. When we pulled up in front of my place, I felt so relieved to be home that I almost ignored the way he didn't drive off immediately. He helped me unload the bags onto the porch, wished me a good night, and then paused by the edge of the driveway. I assumed he was checking the app or the GPS for his next ride, so I didn't pay close attention. Inside, I dropped everything in the living room and flopped onto the couch for a minute. When I got up to lock the door, I glanced outside and noticed the SUV still idling a few houses down. I told myself he was probably waiting for another ride request and didn't think much of it. But something about the angle he parked at gave me a weird jolt, like he'd been facing my house deliberately. I tried to shake it off and went to unpack. About 20 minutes later, while sorting the boxes in my living room, I heard the soft chime from my phone, the notification from my doorbell cam. At first, I assumed it was a neighbor, or maybe a package I forgot I ordered, so I tapped the screen without thinking. The moment the video loaded, a sharp tension hit my chest. The SUV was back. Same dark blue, same worn-out state logo on the cap, same driver stepping out and walking straight toward my front door like he belonged there. He wasn't holding a phone or pretending to drop something off. He was scanning the front of my place like he was memorizing it. The camera caught him leaning slightly toward the door, his hand touching the handle as if testing the weight of it. I just stared at the screen, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. I paused the video and went back to watch the earlier clip, the one from when he first dropped me off. That's when I noticed something that made me sit down automatically. He had taken photos of my house before leaving. Quick, subtle movements, but clear as day once I knew what to look for. He'd pretended to stretch his arm to adjust his cap, but the camera in his hand had been pointed directly at my windows. I replayed it 3 times, feeling this growing sense of violation bubbling under my ribs. This wasn't curiosity anymore, or even nosiness. He wanted information, my layout, my entry points, maybe even whether I lived alone. I stayed near the door with the deadbolt secured, and every light inside turned off except the one by the hallway. Watching the live feed made my throat tighten. Mark circled the porch once, as if trying to see through the frosted glass, and then stepped toward the side window near the kitchen. He cupped his hands around the edges of the glass to look inside. I remember standing absolutely still, barely breathing, feeling the weight of the silence inside my home. The thought of him knowing exactly where my shopping bags were, expensive electronics, brand new clothes, sealed boxes stacked right where I left them, made everything feel 10 times more unsettling. He stayed outside for maybe a full minute, but it stretched out in my head like an hour. Then he walked back toward the SUV, but he didn't leave immediately. He sat there with the headlights off, engine humming low, as if waiting for something. I didn't know if he expected me to open the door or if he was checking whether anyone else lived here. I remember moving slowly toward the back of the house, thinking through every possible scenario, calling a friend, dialing 911, or just grabbing my keys and slipping out through the back gate. The whole time I kept watching that little screen in my hand, counting the seconds and hoping the SUV would eventually back out and disappear from the street. The SUV finally rolled away, but my nerves didn't settle. I kept replaying everything that happened in my head, trying to understand why a complete stranger would come back to my house after dropping me off. The more I thought about the way he questioned me in the car, the more it all lined up in a way that made my jaw clench. He hadn't been making conversation, he'd been gathering details. I didn't want to sit there waiting for him to return again, so I grabbed my phone and called the non-emergency police line, explaining everything as calmly as I could. They sent a patrol car to drive by, and the officer who spoke with me told me to stay inside, lock everything, and save the footage in case things escalated. Hearing someone else take it seriously made my pulse slow down just a little. After the officer left, I walked through my place, securing every window and checking every blind. I remember noticing how loud the house felt when it was quiet. Every click of a lock echoed like I was inside a much bigger space. I stacked the shopping bags in the hallway, far from any window, in case that had been what caught his interest. I kept thinking about how he paused before leaving earlier, how he tried to mask taking those photos, how he circled the porch like he was looking for weak spots. Even with the police making rounds, I didn't shake the feeling that he might try again once the street got quieter. I sat on the couch with my phone in my hand, doorbell cam open, waiting for any sign of that SUV. Hours went by without anything happening, and at some point I must have dozed off sitting upright. I woke up just past sunrise with the doorbell cam still open on my screen, and my living room washed in that pale morning light that makes everything feel distant and unreal. Before doing anything else, I checked the camera history again. No alerts, no movement, no car passing slowly by. For a while, I just sat there trying to understand what he thought he would gain from coming back, whether he wanted to steal something, or whether the interest he showed in my purchases had been just a small part of something bigger he'd planned. The uncertainty made me uneasy in a way that stuck with me for days. I ended up filing an official report later that morning, submitting every clip and every detail I remembered from the ride. The officer who followed up told me the SUV wasn't registered under the name he used on the app, which made everything click together in the worst way. The rideshare company suspended the account, and someone from their safety team called me to say they were cooperating with the investigation. I never saw that driver again, and nothing else happened after that day. But I still think about the moment I watched him on my camera, trying the door like it was already his. Even now, whenever I get home from being out late, I check the street twice before stepping out of the car. It's strange how fast a normal day can turn into something you never forget. The seasonal job at Target came at a moment when I really needed the extra cash, and my routine back then was basically work, eat something quick, and pass out the moment I got home. That day had been busier than usual, the kind of steady crowd where every cart seemed to squeak louder than the last. But the break room felt like a tiny pocket of quiet compared to the sales floor. I remember sitting there with a microwaved burrito on a paper towel, scrolling through my phone, trying to relax my shoulders after dealing with a string of impatient customers. The break room smelled like burnt popcorn and lemon-scented cleaner, and there was a poster on the wall reminding employees to choose kindness, which always felt a little ironic during holiday rushes. I didn't have many friends on that shift yet, so I usually kept to myself unless someone decided to chat. My locker was on the far left side of the room, painted red but chipped around the handle, easy to recognize. Everything about that space felt safe and predictable in a way I didn't question. The door opened with that hollow metal thud, and a guy stepped in wearing a Target vest slightly faded compared to ours, like it had been washed too many times. He looked mid-20s maybe, tall and lean, with dark hair that stuck out slightly like he hadn't bothered to smooth it down. What caught my attention was the way he scanned the room before even acknowledging me, as if checking for someone specific. Then he smiled. Not forced, not strange, just a quick, friendly expression, and said he worked a different shift and was just trying to find a quiet place for a break. Something about the way he said it sounded odd, like he was improvising the sentence as it left his mouth, but I didn't think much of it. Seasonal employees bounced between shifts all the time, so I figured maybe he was new or covering hours for someone. He sat across from me and started talking casually, asking how long I'd been working there and whether I liked the store layout. Nothing too unusual at first, until he shifted into questions that didn't sound like the kind someone from another shift would really care about. He asked which doors employees usually used to leave at night, whether the managers stayed late, and if the security guy who walked the floor had a fixed route or just wandered. His tone never changed, still light, chatty, but the questions felt strangely specific in a way that made my attention sharpen. I tried to answer vaguely, shrugging, pretending I barely knew the details. He nodded a lot, like each little piece of information meant more to him than it should have. At one point, he even asked if the lockers were assigned or if anyone could just take an empty one. I laughed it off, telling him we each had our own, but he didn't look away from the row of lockers when I said it. When my break ended, I tossed my burrito wrapper and told him I'd see him around, though I wasn't sure I meant it. I remember glancing back once before leaving and noticing him standing near the lockers, not heading toward the door like someone about to return to work. The shift went on normally after that, busy enough that I didn't revisit the weirdness in my mind. But 2 hours later, when I finally went back to the break room to grab my wallet for a drink, the door creaked open and I saw the same guy crouched in front of my locker. The metal latch was half open, my jacket pushed aside, and he had something in his hand. Something small, maybe my keychain. His head snapped up when he heard me, and for a moment he just stared, wide-eyed like he had been caught doing something he couldn't talk his way out of. He bolted upright so fast the locker door bounced shut behind him, and for a second, neither of us said anything. My voice came out louder than I intended when I asked what he thought he was doing, but he didn't try to explain or apologize. He just muttered something like "wrong locker" and rushed past me, practically shoulder-checking the trash bin on his way out. I remember standing there, breathing hard, staring at the dent he'd made in the dust on the floor with his shoe. My wallet was still inside, but everything felt shuffled, like he had gone through each item one by one. The keychain I thought he'd taken, a little metal lighthouse my sister gave me, was sitting crooked on the top shelf. It bothered me in a way I couldn't shake, like he had touched something that didn't belong to him. Not just physically, but personally. I told a manager about it, but the moment I said I didn't know his name, their interest disappeared into a shrug. The rest of my shift dragged, each aisle somehow louder than the one before, and every time someone walked past me wearing a vest, I found myself glancing at their face just to be sure it wasn't him. I kept replaying the break room in my head, wondering how long he'd been digging through my stuff before I walked in. A couple of co-workers joked that maybe he was looking for snacks or headphones, but the questions he had asked me earlier wouldn't get out of my mind. It wasn't the kind of curiosity you hear from someone just trying to make small talk. It reminded me of how customers sometimes poke around, trying to find loopholes for returns or ways around policies, but sharper, like he was collecting pieces for something bigger. I tried to focus on zoning the toy aisle, lining up boxes and straightening price tags, but my attention kept drifting toward the back hallway, half expecting him to reappear. When the shift finally ended, I headed toward the parking garage, grateful to be done. The air felt colder than it had earlier, sharp with that artificial chill garages always seem to have. My footsteps echoed against the concrete, the click of the overhead lights buzzing faintly above me. I spotted my car 2 rows over, tucked between a beige SUV and a faded blue sedan. As I walked toward it, I noticed someone leaning against the low wall near the exit ramp, partly hidden by the shadow of a pillar. At first I assumed it was another employee waiting for a ride, but the posture, still slightly angled toward my lane, made me slow down. When he shifted enough for the light to catch his face, I realized it was him. The same too bright vest, the same dark hair sticking up unevenly. He wasn't smoking or looking at his phone or pretending to do anything. He was just watching. I kept walking but angled slightly toward a different row, pretending I'd forgotten where I parked. My pulse punched against my ribs as I tried to think of what to do next. He stepped away from the pillar, not moving closer but adjusting his stance like he wanted a clearer look at me. I could feel the weight of his attention trailing every step I took, and the garage suddenly felt too empty, too quiet, like all the normal noises had been dialed down. I spotted a security camera mounted above the stairwell door and made a beeline for it, pretending to rummage through my bag as if looking for something. From the corner of my eye, I saw him shift again, this time leaning forward slightly, as though deciding whether to follow. I didn't wait to find out. I pushed through the stairwell door, letting it slam behind me, and took the steps 2 at a time until I reached the landing with the security office sign. Inside the security office, only one guard was working, a guy named Elias, who'd transferred from another store earlier that month. He looked surprised when I walked in, probably because I barely got any words out before pointing toward the stairwell door and trying to explain what happened. I told him about the break room, the locker, the questions, and now the parking garage. His expression shifted slowly from confusion to concern, and he asked me to stay put while he checked the cameras. The monitor's glow lit up the whole room, showing different angles of the garage. When he pulled up the feed for my level, the guy in the vest was still there, pacing a slow, tight line near the same pillar. He wasn't wandering or heading toward a car. He was just waiting. Elias radioed another guard and told me not to leave the office until they cleared the area. Watching that screen made my chest tighten. Something about the way the guy kept glancing toward the entry lane felt deliberate, like he knew exactly where I should have been walking. A few minutes later, the other guard reported that the man had disappeared between camera zones, slipping out of view around the far ramp. They swept the whole level, but didn't spot him again. Elias suggested escorting me to my car, and even though part of me felt embarrassed, like I was making a big deal out of nothing, I wasn't about to walk back there alone. We took the elevator down, and I remember the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead seeming louder than usual. When the doors opened, my car was right where I'd left it, but my eyes kept darting around, checking behind concrete barriers, looking for any movement. The 2 guards stood by while I unlocked the door and got inside, and I didn't relax until I was pulling out of the garage with the exit gate lifting in front of me. Even then, I kept checking my mirrors the whole drive home. For the next few days, every shift felt stretched thin by anxiety. I'd catch myself glancing at strangers who walked too close to the employee areas or lingering near the back hallway. I asked a manager again whether someone from a different shift matched the description I gave, but they couldn't confirm anyone like him. No transfers, no recent hires wearing older vests, no one who should have been in the break room that day. One co-worker suggested maybe he'd stolen a vest from an old donation bin, which honestly made everything worse, because it meant he could have walked in looking like one of us without raising any suspicion. I kept thinking about the locker, how he'd been touching my stuff with that weird focus, and the garage, and the way he stood there like he had all the time in the world. The last time I saw him, if you can call it that, was a week later. I had just clocked out and was passing the upper windows facing the garage. Below, near the same pillar as before, a man in a faded red vest stood briefly in the open, head tilted upward like he was scanning the upper floors. The angle made it hard to see his face clearly, but something about the stance matched him. Before I could get a better look, he slipped behind a parked van and never reappeared on the other side. I stood there for a long moment, trying to decide if I should report it again, but something in me said not to go back out there at all. I ended up calling a friend for a ride and stopped parking in the garage entirely after that. Nothing ever happened again, and no one ever figured out who he was or what he wanted. All I know is that the way he watched me wasn't casual. It felt like intention, like a plan I interrupted without realizing it. Even now, I still think about how close he stood to my locker and how easily things could have gone another way if I'd walked in just a minute later.